Hi there, welcome to YOKE channel. In this video, I'll be taking you through the step-by-step method of drafting a bustier. So let's get straight to it. For the front pattern, we'll start by marking out our baseline where all other measurements would begin. Then I'll move on to slanting our shoulder. I'll do this by marking out half of our shoulder measurement and then slanting it down to 3 inches, coming down from your shoulder by 1 inch and slanting it down to 3 inches. Then we'll mark our armhole measurement, which is our bust divided by 6 and then adding 1.5 to it. I explained all of this in my detailed video on how to draft a basic bodice. Please see my last video to understand fully. So then after marking our armhole measurements, we'll go on to start marking our vertical measurements, which are the bust point, the under bust point, and then our half length. So I'm going to mark this in different places so that it is easy to connect the lines. So we have our bust point there, our under bust here, and then our half length. I also marked out the bust line here and then our bust band measurement, that is our nipple to nipple divided by 2. I'll mark this all the way from the bust point to the half length and connect this line. I'll then go up by 1 inch from our bust point and connect that line like so, and then I would divide our slanted shoulder by 2 and get the midpoint and then connect this line down to the 1 inch I marked above the bust points. Thereafter, I'll take in our normal dart, which can be ½ inch on both sides of the line, and connect to your bust point as we take our normal darts when drafting our basic bodies as seen in my last video. Next up is to tighten the under bust, which is done by deducting your round under bust from your bust measurement, meaning that if your bust measurement is 40 and your under bust measurement is 34, you deduct 34 from 40, your result is 6. Then that result is divided by 4 and then the answer is shared between the two sides. For example, 40 minus 34, which gives 6, divided by 4 gives 1.5. So I'm going to mark ½ inch on the smaller side of the bustier and then 1 inch on that bigger side, like you see me doing in this video. Okay, so mark ½ inch or the smaller measurement on the smaller part of your bustier and then the bigger measurement on the bigger side of your bustier, and then connect the line straight down. Then use your curve rule to connect it back to the bust point as you see me do. The next thing is to mark our armhole curve, which is gotten by marking the midpoint of that armhole, coming in by ½ inch. And I'll go down to mark our initial bust circumference divided by 4. Use our pattern master or your freehand to create this curve. I used the freehand in my previous video. Please see it if you do not have a curve ruler yet. So for our yoke, we'll be coming down by 6.5, depending on how revealing you want your bustier to be, and make a rule right there. So I'm going to take in our darts by marking 1 inch at the smaller part of this pattern and ½ inch at the bigger part. This will enable the bustier rest well on your bust area. I'll then connect this line to the 1 inch marked above the bust point. For my neckline, I'll be using a wideness of 4 inches and a depth of 4 inches. I'll just use my curve rule to create that curve. Please note that you can do this using your freehand. I did this in my previous video, and if you would like to learn how to use a freehand to make a curve, please see my last video on how to make a basic bodice. I'm coming down by 1 inch from that yoke line, just create a little slant at the center area of that dress. I'll then go on to mark my horizontal measurement, starting from my round bust circumference divided by 4. After marking that, I'll measure my dart intake up there and then mark that, adding my sewing allowance if you choose, since it's a pattern paper. Then I'll mark my round under bust divided by 4, measure my dart intake, mark that by the side before infusing my sewing allowance. I'll do the same thing on my half length, measure my waist measurement divided by 4, adding the darts I've taken there, and then add my sewing allowance, and then I'll connect these lines. This is me adjusting my camera so that you all can see. I'm so sorry. And then after this, it is time to take in our bust dart. This is simply the difference between your back half length and your front half length. Mine is 1 inch here, so I'm going to mark that below the bust point, that is from the bust point, mark 1 inch down. So before you cut out, you simply close up your bust dart like you see me doing in this video. I'll open up this first dart, not totally, please, just open it very close to the bust point as you see me do here. Carefully ensure that you're not getting to the bust point exact, and then you come to the side of this bust point, that is the 1 inch you went down with, and then open it close to that bust point as well. This way you're able to move the lower part up to that upper, or to that bust point rather, and then I'm going to use my masking tape to stick this together so that I can then continue my cutting. Then if you notice that there's a space in between, just use your rule to connect it back to the half length. Okay, so that is very easy, and then you can go on to continue your cutting. So I'll carefully cut out the yoke before splitting the center front from the side front like so. Ensure that you don't have curved edges, and then we are done with the front pattern. Don't forget to label like you see me doing, and then we put this aside to cut the back. We'll start with the baseline as usual, and then we'll mark our zipper allowance. You can use 2, you can use 1.5 inches. Then I'll begin with my shoulder measurements divided by 2 from the zipper allowance, and slanting my shoulder like we did at the front part, coming down by 1 inch and then slanting it to 3. Then I'll go on to mark my vertical measurement, which is my back half length. I'm going to mark this in 2 places before connecting the lines. Then I'll mark my armhole like we measured in front, and then I'll create the vertical line and the horizontal line. Next thing is to find the midpoint of this armhole and then create a curve by marking your bust circumference divided by 4 and using your curve rule to create that curve. So this is an error. I went in by ½ inch at the back pattern, which is really wrong. It should go straight. Your curve should just go to the midpoint of that line. So this is me correcting it as so. Please be careful not to make the same mistake. Next thing is to mark your bust band measurements from your chest line down to your half length. Connect this line. At this back pattern, I'll be using our normal dart, okay, because I'm not creating a yoke. So I'm just going to connect this line up to my chest line, and then I'll take my waist measurements divided by 4, add my dart intake and then my sewing allowance. I'll also go up to my bust points and mark my allowance and connect these lines. So I'm just showing you, in case you want to use a yoke, you can come down by 6 or 8 inches and draw that line to create your own yoke. So going down to the half length, I'm going to go in by ½ inch, please, not 1/2 inch, and mark this line up to the bust line or chest line. This will help eliminate bulginess on your zipper area at the back. So now for my neckline, I'll be using 4 by 2 inches, that is wideness of 4 inches and then the depth of 2 inches, and I'm just going to create that curve, and it's time to cut. Here I made that error again of cutting in, so I just use my masking tape to put that back and then cut the real armhole. So just in case you want to have a back yoke as well, just mark 8 inches or 6 inches and then make that line and then cut out, defining this as your yoke. Go on to trim out this ½ inch for your zipper, and then we are good to create magic on your fabric. Don't forget to add ½ inches when you're cutting on your main fabric. So this is what it should look like if you're cutting out a yoke for your back pattern, and then you're good. Please do not forget to subscribe to my channel and leave comments in the comment section. I would love to hear from you.